Hey guys, we've got a very exciting video for you today. We've got a new thing for the Nug. Now, I was online browsing away and looking for a solution for my Sora actually. I've got a couple of mechanical gauges in there and it just doesn't match the aesthetics of the car. So what I really wanted was a little screen where I could have my gauges displayed. Now, the big problem we have on the XL and the Sora is they don't have traditional OBD2 ports, which is your onboard diagnostics. So a lot of screens, you can get a screen or you can use your phone where you can plug into your OBD2 port and then it'll display all your sensors, you know, your speedo, your oil, water temp and all that sort of stuff. We don't have that. So I found a company called OneGauge. A small company in America, a really nice dude runs it called Michael. And I hit him up and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is my race car. And he's like, that's really cool. I'm like, why don't we try and put one in the XL and we'll be able to display everything. So he sent me this custom OneGauge board. So this is basically what the OneGauge is. We've got two options. What we're doing here is a DIY kit. So the DIY kit, obviously, is do it yourself. So Michael makes the board to your specifications. So it has everything we need. And then he just basically gives you a list of the parts. Good thing about that, especially for us in Australia, is for him, he has to buy all the parts, he has to ship it all over, which means a big box, lots of components, and then obviously it's his time to build the kit and put it all together. With the DIY, we just get the circuit board, we have the list of parts, we buy them locally. So a lot of these parts I've bought from Australian sellers, bits from J-Car, things like that. So it's cost us absolutely, it's very cheap, really, all in all. So let me run you through it. What is the OneGauge? As I've mentioned, it allows us to have a display with our gauges, so our water temp and all that sort of stuff. The way that does that is, with the OneGauge board, it allows us to run independent sensors. So we can run whatever sensor we want. The list of sensors this thing runs is huge. And I'll quickly run through what we are gonna have on the Nugget. So first of all, we have oil pressure. So that'll give us our oil pressure for the car. We have water temperature. Tell us how hot the car is running. We have a external GPS antenna, so you can run it does have a GPS module built in, but this gives us an external one. I'm actually going to mount this through and on the roof of the car to give us the best reception possible, and that gives us can actually give us lap times, but it will also give us GPS speedo, which is quite accurate. Then I also am running an ambient temperature, so I'm going to run that in the intake box to see what our ambient temperature coming in the engine is, purely for fun. But the list of other sensors is huge. You can run G sensors, you can run, we can run a tacho. So we can run a tacho on this too with just a digital signal. But if you supply your fuel sender, you know, your fuel gauge, if you put a multimeter on that and just find your low and high, send that to them. They can program that in so you can have a fuel gauge. They're now doing live tire pressure monitoring, which we might look at later on. It's very cool. The list is almost endless. We can have anything we want and we can display it however we want. So there's a bunch of different display options. The way we are going to display it is on this Nextion 7-inch touchscreen display, which is one of the cheaper options. It's a really cool little display. And wasn't that expensive. I think I paid about $140 delivered for the display. Let me just get that out of there. So that cool little display there. But you can also transmit it. So this has got Bluetooth built in, so we can transmit to phones. We can run, there's higher end displays where you can mix and match stuff. There's lots of options. All the details are on the OneGauge website, but this is what we're gonna run. So we're gonna run our 7-inch Nextion display, which is very cool. Now the rest of the kit, basically we have our OneGauge board, and then we just need an Arduino Mega 2560. This is basically a computer. So the board has what we need to translate all the sensors coming in, and then this Arduino basically just plugs on the bottom there. I won't do it right now because I need to concentrate, but that plugs just on the bottom there, and that is our computer that will then transmit all the data to the screen. So yeah, it's a really cool system for people that don't have OBD2 ports or don't want multiple gauges. Michael has preset a bunch of stuff on here, so we have the ability to swipe through the screens, and we have different things. We can also set this is the other thing that I asked for specifically, and you can do things like this. You can just say, hey, can I have this? And you know, for a few extra bucks, he'll add it. So we've got these 2 extra wires here. That is actually a 5-volt output for high water temp and low oil pressure, which is really cool. So I've bought a few buzzers and LEDs. So I'm gonna make warning buzzers and LEDs for if the car's overheating or if we've lost oil pressure. I'm gonna put it in the field of view and it'll bzzz and shine an LED at me to let me know I need to pull over because the car's about to go kaput. And I think that's really handy because I do have oil pressure gauges and water temp gauges on the car at the moment. But honestly, I only really look at them on the straight briefly just to make sure the car's running okay. I'm not looking at them when I'm booting around corners or if I've got other cars real close to me. So having something that will give me a visual and audible warning to let me know the car's in trouble is brilliant. It's beyond useful. So that's fantastic. And then we've just got some other things, like I've got an extended cable. So that'll be the cable that goes from the the 1 gauge board to our screen. I've got some Tessa tape for wrapping all our wires. Now, what we need to do is, if you buy from 1 gauge, you have the choice of different boxes and things like that. Because this is a DIY kit, they basically say, find your own. So me being me, I got on CAD and I have 3D printed us a box. So this is the box for the 1 gauge board. So once that's all in there, the screw holes match up with the board, which was actually quite tricky. And we've got a port out there where our USB port for our Arduino board will hang out so we can update the software and load everything on. And now I've just got these chunky bits here where we can screw it into the car, and then a nice lid with a 1 gauge logo. Unfortunately, I've got some marks on there because I had some marks on my 3D printed bed, so I might print a new one of them up to make it a bit shinier later. For our screen, so we've got a beautiful 7-inch touchscreen there, I made this monstrosity. So this is I designed this completely from scratch. This base will screw into where our gauge pods usually screw into, so our central vent assembly. So we completely remove that. We'll put the base in through the back, screw it back in with the 4 screws, and then I've made basically a giant GoPro style mount that allows us to tilt the monitor. The reason I've done that is in the past I've put displays in cars where it's reflected from somewhere outside the car, so to the back window or the side window, and you can't see the screen. So with that, I'll have the ability to just adjust out that reflection, and hopefully we don't get any funky reflections. But on super sunny days, I also made this little clip-on screen hood, which I'm going to have some attachments on, but that actually clips on, and that allows us to get rid of some of the glare. And I might flock the inside of it and do all that. So that's pretty cool. I don't know if it's going to work 100%. This is just a prototype, but I think it's a pretty good start. And then we've got a slot in the top there because we use a micro SD card there for the software for the screen. So all our graphics go on that, and we can access that from the top. And then we've just got a cable port from there to there, and that'll go down to the 1 gauge board, sorry. So this is everything. I'm pretty excited about this. This has been quite a few months in the planning, just chatting to Michael about everything and getting all the parts together, but it actually works out fairly cheap, and it does fit in with the Excel rules. So the rules are we are allowed data logging and gauges and things. The only thing is, apart from the tacho, you're not allowed to tap into the wiring harness or the ECU or any other sensors on the car, which we're not. We're running completely standalone sensors. And I think it can't cost over a certain amount. I can't remember how much it was. I think it might be quite a bit, like 1,000 or 800, which this is well below. And it also has to be commercially viable, which it is. You can buy it online and it is good to go. So it's legal, it's very cool, and I'm excited to get it in the car. So tomorrow we're going to go and we're going to start putting in our sensors, putting in all our bits, and we're going to take our laptop, upload our software, and hopefully we'll have this puppy working before winter next weekend. Let's go do it. All right, it's the next day. We're back at the Nug, and it's time to get this thing installed. So I've got all my parts laid out here. I've got my laptop set up here with the instruction manual on PDF. I could print it out, but I didn't because I forgot. And the first thing I want to do is replace all the old sensors. So I'm going to rip out all the old wiring for the water temp and the oil pressure sensor, and then we'll put in our new water temp and our new oil pressure sensor, and then we'll run new wiring. I went and got some multi-core wire from Autobarn. It's about $5 a meter, although I think I went a bit short on that, as you do. So we'll rip out all the old wiring from the old sensors, and then the next thing I want to do is we're going to have to remove our stock gauges. So we'll take that out and take out all the wiring. Then we'll do the power and everything else and figure out where to mount our box and all that jazz. So let's get started. Okay, one thing I found about sensors for oil pressure in this car is they're tapered threads, but it seems to be much more tapered on the XL than any other car. So all the sensors you get for them, even though they're tapered, they're not tapered enough. So I've got a thread file here, and I'm just using the right thread. I'm just filing it down a bit more just to give it a bit more taper, which is what we did with the last one, and it goes in a lot further, because at the moment it only goes in about, you know, 1 thread or 2 threads, which is not enough. So this will get it sort of halfway up and lock it in there nice and tight. So we'll run that round and yeah, put it in. Okay, new oil sensors in, and it's much easier with, because where's the old one? That's the old one. You've got to get a spanner on the back of it, which is in the neck. New one, just a socket. So put it on there and screw it in, and she's good. Now we need to get this sensor out of the water. Unfortunately, there's water in this pipe, so I might have to drop a bit out of the radiator, and then, yeah, get that out, and then I'll top the radiator back up. Handy hint, whenever you buy cable, always buy more than you think you need. So I got 2 meters, thinking it'd be enough. Ends just there, and I really need it to end about here. But oh well, we'll make it work. A couple of things I need to do. So this water temp switch, so that'll be our signal wire that'll go through our loom, but we also need to earth this bit. Luckily it does have that little screw hole there, so I'm just going to make a little earth lead. We'll go to, I've got an earth lead here. And we'll also need to earth the oil pressure sender, so that's the black one there. So I'll just solder a little cable together, join them together, and that can join to that, and that's done. And then we just need the 2 cables there for the sensor and the power to come up to here, and then 1 to there. So we'll do all that now, and that's all finished, and then that's the engine bay done, and we can go and finish the interior. One other thing, so this is our power lead. I ended up attaching it in here because I had the main power feed to the fuse box, and it was just easier. I did put an inline fuse with a 10 amp fuse, which is what they recommend. Just a little backup in case something goes wrong. They're very easy to put in, and we just have a little 10 amp fuse, spade fuse in there. So let's get this all sorted out. Great. Okay, so this is all wired up now. So that's our signal wire from our sensor. Now this needs to be earthed. Obviously, normally it would go into the block of the car, but because this is in a separate spot that is obviously on rubber hoses, we need to earth it. So there's a little screw hole there. So we've just made an earth lead that goes over to here and earthed out. Same with our oil pressure sensor needs an earth, so that's wired in. And then here's our main wire with all our cables. So our sensor and our positive for the oil pressure. I'm going to clean all this up a bit later on, but I'm just running out of time. I forgot one of my sensors. This guy. This is our ambient temperature sensor for our airbox, purely for fun. I forgot to put it in. So I've just pushed it through our grommet and the firewall. Now I'm just going to somehow make it fit in here. I think for now I'm just going to drill a hole and pop it in there and just seal it up. And then later on we might make a nice little bracket for it to sit kind of here and, you know, give us a bit of a reading. But for now we'll just pop it in there, and we'll get the rest of it done, and we'll make that a bit neater later. So I've got the sensors in the engine base, and now I'm tackling the interior. So what I'm doing is getting rid of a bunch of old wiring. I don't know if you guys remember from the OG crowd, I put in a second thermo fan in this car because I thought it was going to get hot, but it turns out the XL cooling system is incredible and I don't need it. So I'm ripping all that old stuff out, which includes all this wiring, and also now we need to get rid of our stock gauges. So this is where our new one will fit and sit here. So we're going to take the gauges out, and we've got all the wiring down here for it, which is fun and games. And I'm taking out the switches too. So I took out the switch for the thermo fan. So now we've still got switches for our Monster Taco. So I want to leave that in because that's great. So we'll have the Monster Taco on and lights on for it, and then we'll have a switch for our 1 gauge assembly to turn that on and off. So now we just need to pop these guys out. So we'll pop these guys out, and this is also a really good time to show you my new assembly. So this is the new iteration of my central gauge pod. So remember, the old ones used to kind of bolt into the vent space. This one actually replaces, if I can balance my light here without it going AWOL, stay. This one actually replaces the entire vent assembly, and it's held in by 4 screws in the factory position. So yeah, it's a really clean thing. So when you're building your XL, pretty much everyone who builds their XL has to take the dashboard out so you can fit your roll cage in and either get it welded or bolted or whatever. And then you go and put your dashboard in afterwards. So while your dash is out, this is a sweet option for all you guys who want to run gauges. You can just screw that in. It's really nice and neat, and if you're flocking the dash, put this in and you can flock all that to match. It'll look so cool. It's got the print lines on it, but I don't mind that. If you don't like that, as I said, you can either flock it, or what you can do is you give it a light sand, use some plastic primer filler, give it a spray, and it'll come up schmick. So yeah, if you want one of those, let me know. I'm not doing them, I can't remember the price off the top of my head, I think about 55. They take a long time to print. They take about 19 hours to print, and there's quite a bit of material in there, but they look really good, and they're quite light because it's got a structure inside that, like a honeycomb structure, keeps it strong and light. So yeah, if you want one of those, give me a shout out. I do them in the 67mm and the 52mm. So these are the 67s, and then the smaller 52. So yeah, give us a buzz. Anyway, we'll get this old stuff out, and we can remove all the wiring for that, and then start fresh. Cool, I've been booting through this little bit because, yeah, you don't need to see all this, but basically what I've done is I've now got a main power feed to the 1 gauge. So it's basically the feed from the battery, comes in, goes through the switch, and then it's attached just to that side. You're better off running the power from the battery side, not from anywhere where there's an alternator pulse, because the pulsing of the alternator, and when you're starting the car, the low voltage can damage electronics like this. So this way the battery acts as a buffer from the alternator and gives us a nice clean 12 volt feed, or 14 volt or whatever. So anyway, we've got that now down, and this switch here will be for our 1 gauge. So switch on, switch off, and I'll just move the switch for the taco over this side, and then that's the light for the taco there. So that's perfect. So all I need now is just plug that in to the 1 gauge circuit, and we'll just run an earth. So I'll run an earth lead over there. I'll just make one of those up. And while I was at it, I got rid of all the other wires for the gauges, etc. So now we just need to take out our beautiful and not very old gauge pod assembly there. So maybe I'll put it up online cheap if somebody would like that one. Only used for 1 event, or 2 events. And then we'll put in our 1 gauge one. Let's get cracking. So one of the things I need to do is load our screen files onto our screen. So here I've got it's a micro SD. The manufacturer recommends under 32 gigs, so I've got a little 16 gig with our adapter, which means it can go directly into my laptop. There we go. And then we just need to copy the screen files. We go here, I've got my screen files folder that 1 gauge sent to me. Just copy that TFT file onto our card. For any of you nerds, it has to be a FAT32. Yes. Which most removable storage is FAT32. And that's now good to go. So that's ready for our screen to have all our stuff on it, so we know what the hell we're doing. Go back to our instructions and keep on going. Okay, while we're sorting out wiring, we've got our cable here, which is actually from a 3D printer. That's what runs the stepper motors. So you can buy one of them real cheap. And down here we need to just write down which cable is which, if you'll focus camera. So here it says we've got the ground, the RX, the TX, and the 5 volt. So we just need to know which one is which color-wise. So we can write the ground is, let's point that actually at the thing I'm trying to film at. So the ground is red, so that's confusing. The RX, which is one of the signal wires, is blue. Just write this down. The TX, the other signal wire, is green. And then our 5 volt, which is our power, is black. So basically back to front from what we normally have. Super helpful, but that's good. So you can see they all line up there with what's written just on the screen circuit board. Sorry, it's probably a bit fuzzy on the GoPro, but just trust me on this one. And then the other end, we basically cut that connector off because that doesn't work on this. And then we have a map on our PDF that tells us where on the 1 gauge board we screw those into. And that's about the extent of it. So I'll bring my laptop in, but the laptop has plans. It actually shows down here underneath those terminals, it actually writes what is what. So they do have pictures showing what's written under there without the terminals, so it's all nice and easy to understand. Cable wise, what I've done is I've got, this is our main power to the 1 gauge, which I think goes up here, but we'll have a look at the diagram. We've got an earth here for the 1 gauge, so that's just the main power and earth, and that power obviously goes up to our switch and is fused. And then these cables here are all the ones we put in the engine base, so we don't need those two. They're just spares, so if we want to add some stuff in later on, some other sensors, we've got them in the engine bay, so that's handy. And then these ones are for our water sensor and our oil pressure sensor. And then we've just got our cable here for our ambient temperature sensor in our airbox. The only other one we need to do is our GPS module, which I've got up on the roof, and I'm just going to run down. And that just screws into that port there. And then I do need to run a signal wire from my tacho over, but that's, I'm going to do that last, as I want to get all this done first. So let's screw this together. Cool, so I've wired the screen in. Now, in the instructions, this is the TX and the RX that we found earlier. This whole bank here and this side here is all just positives and negatives. So it's 5 volt positives and negatives, or you can negative to the chassis, it's the same thing. So as the screen comes in, we just split them off. So we've got the power there, there's the sensor bits, and that should be enough for our screen. And now we just need to run these through. So we've got our ones for our sensor, so I need power for the oil, so I'll run that through and put it onto one of those powers. And then we've got our water and oil sensor, so we just need to find them on the plans. Got our plans up here on our laptop, so this shows it without the screw blocks on it. So we've got all the numbers, and then we can just refer to the chart to see what number goes where, and that's about it really. And then that's our main negative and positive, which powers on our board. So we'll get the rest of those screwed in now. Okay, sweet. That's all wired in. We haven't plugged in our screen yet, but the plug's just there for it because we don't need that just yet. So what we have to do now is update the software on this with everything we need from 1 gauge. So I've got my very short cable here that'll plug into our 1 gauge, and then on the laptop here it'll tell it basically the PDF runs you through everything you need to do to update it. I won't go through it all because if you buy one, or when you buy one, it tells you everything in here. It's not too complicated. There's just a couple of little walkthrough bits of how to connect to the Arduino, because sometimes it just cracks it through Windows. But you just follow their setups and we'll just upload our software onto it now. Sweet, so I just uploaded the software. That was super easy. All you gotta do is just make sure you just plug your USB port in, which powers it up. Make sure you're on the right COM port, which is easy. You just go into your device's settings and see what COM port it is, which was 3 for me. So you just select that, select the right Arduino, and then select your file from one gauge, and just click upload, and that's it. It just took maybe a couple of minutes just to copy everything over, and that's done. Okay, we've got our fancy pants attachment for the one gauge in there, which is, I didn't film that because it's a real bitch to put in, so you didn't need to hear me swearing and cursing about that. And now we've got our display here, which I've screwed in. I've still got to put the cable in. I've got to run up, so I haven't got that plugged in yet, so I'll leave the face off. But then we just got to bolt this in, which I showed you earlier. It's just a big bolt setup. Righto, screen is in and looks sick. I'll power it up for you in a minute. I'm just sorting out some of the sensor issues. I think it's my fault, but we'll sort that out. But everything else is working. I'll show you in a mo. I want to set up my GPS, so I've got my little sensor here. And because race car, we're just going to drill a hole in the roof. Bung that through. And then what I'm going to do is seal that up with some silicone, and now I'm going to 3D print a little for it here, just to cover up the cable in the hole. And it should look pretty good. So we'll do that now. Drilling holes in cars. Well, that felt really wrong. I didn't like that. There we go, hole drilled. My old man found a nice little rubber grommet, so we've got that, or just put a blob of silicone in there. As I said, I might make a little 3D printed little cover for that and make it all nice and neat. The magnet is crazy strong, so it's not moving. And that comes through here. And then I've got these little clips that poke into the stock chassis holes and make cable ties. So we'll run cable down through the dash into our one gauge box. Okay, bit of a weird intermission. It's actually the next morning. My old man was around and I needed his help to do something else to the car, so I had to put the one gauge on hold for the night. But now we have a passenger seat in the Nug, which is something I've been wanting to do for ages, so I can take mates out. So this is, let me get out the car and show you. This is the old seat that I was running as the driver's seat in a Nug, and is now the passenger seat. So we got a cool rail setup from Aussie Auto, from the guys from Aussie Auto, really nice dudes. So they sent that over, and then we use these old seat rails from, they're actually from a Lamborghini Gallardo GT3 car, don't ask. And then we've got our old seat in there, and we got these wicked harnesses from Brent at Luxe Performance, one of our lovely supporters over in WA. These are actually it's actually a harness out of a Lotus Exige, I believe. It's an optional extra they sold from the factory that has a standard seatbelt buckle, so it's a 4-point harness and is ADR approved, which is really cool. So you can use those on the street, which is unreal. So we'll wrap them onto the bar. I've already got the mounting point there, and I put another one down here with a plate underneath, and that's good to go. So that was a bit of a weird intermission, but I'm super stoked that I've got that in there for the weekend. So now we can get back to finishing off this one gauge. So where we left off is the screen is up. I still haven't turned it on for you guys because I just wanted to get everything sort of wired up and working. You can see our box down there is still a bit of a mess. And so we'll just clean all that up and then we'll start it up for you. So a quick little side note, and this is something really cool. So I started it up and I wasn't getting the oil pressure sender reading, and it was just a tiny little problem. But I hit up mate Michael at One Gauge, and yeah, he just emailed me straight back and said, yep, no worries. I just told him a couple of things, showed him some pictures, and he goes, yep, sweet, sent me a software update. That's in my email. I'll just plug it in and update it and everything works, which is unreal. Honestly, you wouldn't get that sort of customer service from the big brands. Obviously being DIY and the fact that we're using our own sensors, because this isn't one of the sensors he had on the list. I had to find this one. It was just a little bit out of whack. So yeah, hopefully this software update should all have that sorted, but everything else is working, so it's pretty cool. So I'll run the software update and then we'll show you the screen. Okay, so we've got our display all mounted and wired up. We've got a One Gauge box down here. I'm going to mount it in here. I'm just going to do some nut certs, and then I will go in there with the case, with the lid and everything. It should be really nice and neat, and wrap all the cables. But for now, the moment of truth, sorry the light outside is really bright, but let's turn her on. How good is that? Really quick startup on these puppies. And then we can go through all our gauges and displays. So at the moment we're showing voltage because we've got it hooked up to the battery, and I did start the car this morning, so we're cooling. The trans temp and the fuel pressure is, I spoke to Michael from One Gauge, and basically that's just a bit of static electricity in the circuit board just showing a reading. So we can turn all that off, but whatever, we'll get there. And then we've got our RPM and our speed, which is really cool. So we've got all these different displays we can run. This one's sick. It's like the DeLorean. It's all very retro. It's very cool. Same with our vacuum there. We're just getting a static reading, but we've got so oil pressure. We can do fuel levels, so we can hook it up to our fuel sender. We can have fuel and fuel pressure too. So I am going to run a fuel pressure sensor off this. We've got our intake temperature, which is our little intake sensor I've got in there, and our coolant there, which is really cool. And then just basically just different displays, different things. So we've got our speed in the middle, we've got our RPM, water temperature, air temperature, and then down here we've got, I mean, this shows you some of the sensors. So you can do air fuel ratio, fuel pressure, trans temperature, oil pressure, all that stuff. And this one's cool. This is probably my favorite and probably the most relevant to what I'm doing. So we've got our voltage, we've got our water temperature there, we've got our oil pressure, and then we've got our speed, and then we've got our RPM. Very cool. And then all sorts of different displays. They've even got an off-road one here, so you can put a tilt sensor in the box, and then that'll actually show you, once you calibrate it, that'll show you the tilt of the car both ways, which is really sick. And then these gauges too, and the cool thing is it's set up so we can set our low oil pressure and high water temp, and the gauge will actually go red if there's a problem, which is very cool. And then we've just got a black version of that, and then back to the original one, and up here it'll tell us we've got oil pressure. I think we've still got mile per hour here, so we might just get that updated, but other than that, it's very cool. So let's start this puppy up. Car's sounding a bit rickety, but we've got our RPM there, and we've still got our monster tacho there working. You can see in here we've got our oil pressure and our coolant temperature. Very cool. This one's cool, digital RPM. So yeah, lots of cool stuff. This one looks pretty sick. And such smooth signals from the RPM too. And oil pressure down there. Very sick, very stoked. Let's get this board mounted up, get ready for winter. Right, so we're mounting this box up down here, and I've made these fat sections where I can screw into. So I've just drilled a couple of holes. I'm going to put some riv nuts in there, and then just bend up a little alloy bracket to go against that, so they'll sit there and there and hold it in place. And we've got one on the other side. Let's do it. Alrighty, we're done. Check out the box down here. So that's our 1 gauge box mounted up down there. Looks really good. It's in a really nice spot. It's all tucked away and nice and neat. Okay, so that is the installation of our 1 gauge. It's a very cool bit of kit. So full disclaimer, I am working with the guys from One-Gauge, so I hit them up and we're doing a bit of a thing where I'm testing the DIY kit for them and yeah, you know, doing a video and a bit of promo stuff. But I'm always honest with you guys, so basically let's talk about how difficult it is it worth it, all that sort of stuff. So the bad parts. The DIY kit is a bit of work and you do need a bit of knowledge. So you need at least some basic electrical knowledge, you need to know how to use a multimeter, you have to be comfortable with soldering, clipping wires, all that sort of stuff, especially putting sensors in cars. You know, you need some basic electrical knowledge, but not a lot. I'm not great. I'm terrible with resistors and capacitors and all that stuff. This is all basic stuff. This is a new product, so this is a small, you know, it's Michael basically working out of his house and he does a fantastic job. But a lot of this stuff is being developed, it's all sort of fresh. So you do get a few glitches, you do get little things like that. And also because this kit can use so many sensors and you can put your own sensors in it, it doesn't always work with the sensors you get. But on the flip side of all that, the good is there's a great community on Facebook for all this sort of stuff, which is growing, and people help each other out. Michael at One-Gauge is fantastic. I just have a couple of little issues just with the sensors just not reading. Basically, sent him a message, said, hey, this isn't working. He goes, no probs. Did some software tweaks, sent me the file, took me 30 seconds to upload it. Bang, all works great. The assembly is fantastic, the screen looks great, and you can customize your own screens. You've got to learn some software, or Michael can build one for you. So you just hit him up and go, hey, I want to do this, this, and this. You know, he'll charge you a bit for it because it is his time, but he'll make a custom display for you, which is unreal. Plus the fact, like, we're running a 7-inch TFT, but we can do anything. You know, you can run it on your phone. There's all sorts of different displays you can run, and you can run 2 of those screens at once. It's very cheap by comparison. I mean, you look at the systems that some cars run that has something similar to that, we're talking, you know, $1,500 or more. It's really expensive. This is a very budget system that does exactly the same thing. And with the amount of sensors you can run and all that, there's nothing it won't be able to tell you over any of the expensive systems. It's really cool. Probably the only thing with the expensive systems is it might be a little more plug and play, but you're paying a premium dollar for that. As I said, we got this done in a day, couple of little things, but in general, it wasn't that bad. You just follow the instructions. If you've got any real problems, jump online and you can find the solutions for it. Would I recommend it? Yes. I am pretty bloody stoked with how this has turned out. I've got a 7-inch touchscreen with all the sensors in it in my little race car that cost me bugger all. That's very cool. Especially if you're like me, you know, you've been watching a channel, you know, I like DIY, I like making my own stuff. It's cool, and you know, I made this own display housing, but that's an opportunity for you guys to make your own display housing, or I'll sell you one of these. And same with the box, so you can do whatever you want with it. It's all kind of a choose your own adventure, which I think is really cool. So yeah, if you've got a bit of a handy side to you and you want to build something like this, otherwise, just hit Michael up and he can make you a kit and send it over. You'll still probably need to figure out a screen housing depending on what car you're putting it in. But yeah, he can pretty much supply everything else tested, working, and just plug your sensors in and done. So yeah, what a great bit of kit. We're off to Winton on Saturday, and I'm going to try and maybe stick a camera on my helmet sort of looking at the One-Gauge so we can see it operating on track, which would be really cool. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, thank you to Michael from One-Gauge. I'll put the link in the description, so hit him up. If you got any questions, hit me up, hit him up, hit the community up. And I hope you enjoyed this one. I reckon it's pretty funky and I'm pretty stoked with how it turned out. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.